That's my goal. So, questions or comments as far as why I did what I did? I just talked to a reporter from the Cap Journal. I'm sure they'll do a story on it. Again, I'm very grateful for what the state board did yesterday as far as moving the needle forward as far as trying to have more in-person instruction for our children, because that's where we need to get. And we might have some hiccups and some missteps. Who knows what the future holds as far as where we're at with, you know, there's a good downturn right now in the state and in the country as far as outbreak. And I believe in the legislature, we're taking the steps necessary to do our job. And I think at the schools, they're doing the same thing. And I believe it is time to do what we want to do, more in-person instruction for our kids, and the state board is doing that. So again, is there anybody raising their hand or has additional comments on that? If you want to talk to me offline and share your thoughts about what I just said, I'd be glad to talk to anybody. Send me an email, send me a text. I'll call you back. We can talk at any time. All right, let's move on to opening. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you for your reaching out and taking this by the horn, bull by the horn, so to speak, and working with people rather than running rush shot or whatever like that. You know,
when I first made the offer, 4 weeks ago and got put on the agenda, I had a whole different expectation of maybe where I was going. 4 iterations later, Deborah and I were working together, and even this week, Deborah is my partner and she helps me, and she was a little concerned that maybe this was the wrong time. And I said, no, it's the right time. And I said, if they need to voice their frustrations with me on their grievances, I can live with that, and I'm good with that. And they did, and that's good. And I shared back, it's both ways. And that's why we do need to have everybody recognizing that should be our goal. So, enough said again. Nick Myers, you are the man who is going to help me kick off the hearing on House Bill 2038. And before he does that, this is a very simple bill. It's something that is the chairman's bill, and I will be speaking to it. We also have one opponent from the NEA. I understand their opposition. I'll address their concerns even in my comments. And then we as a committee can discuss, does that bill rise to the level of something that's important for us to consider? And I haven't made up my mind on that yet. But again, not a lot of opponents, not a lot of proponents. But Nick, the floor is yours as far as giving the committee a brief explanation and bill brief. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Committee, so this is House Bill 2038, and what this bill would do is that it would create the Educator Protection Act. And really the purpose of this act and the bill is to provide excess professional liability insurance coverage for teachers and to student teachers in the state. So currently, under current law, teachers that are employed by school districts have liability protection insurance coverage through the school district under the Kansas Tort Claims Act. And teachers may also have protection and coverage through a teachers union. What this bill would do is it would provide another level of liability coverage and another option for liability insurance coverage to teachers in the state. And as I said, this coverage would apply to all licensed teachers, both full-time and part-time, and all student teachers holding a student teacher certificate. The bill would also establish the Kansas Educator Liability Fund in the state treasury, and this would be administered by the Commissioner of Insurance. And this is the fund that would be used to procure the insurance coverage. And the commissioner would be charged with implementing this insurance coverage, including establishing the types of coverage and coverage limits, acquiring the policy or policies, establishing the effective date of the coverage, and then administering the claims process. and committee, that's the bill in a nutshell, and I'd be happy to answer questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Questions from the committee? Representative Orr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we chose to go this route with the excess liability, does this also increase the amount that they could be sued above the present level?
Yeah, good question. So that would depend on the claim. So the first layer of coverage would be under the Kansas Tort Claims Act, and I believe that's up to $500,000 for an incident or an occurrence for each claim that's related to that incident or occurrence. And then if the teacher has liability coverage through a union, that would kind of be the next level. And then this would provide an additional level. So if the claim rose to a pretty high amount, this could kick in.
Go ahead.
Are they presently covered to the maximum that they could be held liable for without the excess liability?
Let me think on that. The Tort Claims Act has a limit of coverage that would kick in, and then any additional insurance coverage, depending on those limits, that would be kind of the amount and the limit of liability that coverage would insure the teacher against. I don't know if there's a total limit or cap. That's kind of getting beyond my knowledge. I'm not too well versed in negligence and tort claims actions, as I don't practice in that area very much.
Well,
But
Nick,
I can
I
kinda
tell you
look into
what, you might do a little more research in that area, get with some experts, and then get that information back to us, because that would be a very good question to answer if we did choose to work it, and I would want to make sure we had the best information possible. So I'll give you the time to research and get us some good answers in that area, because that's a very good question, and let's get a very good answer. All right, Nick, thank you. Further questions? I think next up is Representative Stogstill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, with school districts covering teachers with liability policies and KNEA covering their members with liability policies, has there ever been, are there instances of where teachers have had to go beyond those two levels of liability insurance? Is this a problem that doesn't need addressing?
I will address
Certainly
that in my testimony. I don't really think that's happened, but I'd let Nick, if you have knowledge to share for that question, but I'll address some of that in my my reasoning in my testimony.
Certainly, and that kind of stems from the last question as well, or kind of goes on that last question as well. And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, you can check on that answer too and get back information to us so that we'll provide that to committee also.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple administrative questions, perhaps for Deborah. But and I know we're getting a million emails every single day. Do we have the proponent and opponent testimony on this is the first question, and then similar question, is there a fiscal note? I can't find either of those in my email. I do see the bill brief that we received from her.
I can send those out again, Representative Sampson, right now. Hold on.
Okay, I apologize. I must have missed them. Thank you.
And we need to, Nick, do you know fiscal note? In my notes right now, I'm not seeing that either. I can tell you that, I'm going to jump into my testimony a little bit, that this bill is modeled after a bill in Tennessee, and Tennessee is a larger state. Through the process of doing that, I think over a several-year period, It only came into play one time, and that was for an additional $6,000. And in my mind, I can't imagine, based on what Nick shared with the tort claims, with 500,000, it should never be an issue. But that's, again, I'll get more into my testimony, but we will get better answers on both of those questions moving forward. And then again, if we do have a fiscal note, I haven't seen it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But we will get that too. Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nick, do you know of any other, do you know if Kansas provides this excess liability insurance to any other state employee groups?
Good question, and I'm not sure on that one either.
Okay. And just for my clarity, the funds to pay for this excess insurance comes directly from the SGF.
So yeah, there is a kind of going back on the fiscal note question. There is a fiscal note that's out. It looks like the insurance department did kind of provide some estimates on that. And yeah, that the fund that's established in the bill, in order to put money into the fund for that insurance, for the insurance commissioner to procure the insurance and the coverage, that would be subject to appropriation. So
Okay.
I would presume that some money would need to be appropriated in order to procure this insurance coverage.
Yeah.
You might read the fiscal note there too and see what the insurance department stated as well.
So,
With
so is there a different fiscal note than what was posted on the website?
No, I'm looking at the one that's on the website.
Yeah. And to that one, the insurance commissioner didn't have an estimate. I didn't think. They just said they wouldn't be able to give a number until they kind of knew how many teachers and so forth would sign up. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Representative Featherston.
Okay.
Well, and Nick, again, as these questions come up, I know you can continue to look into them and get back with us. I'm sure you're tracking the questions, and we look forward to you providing answers when you're able to get more information. But they're good questions, and I appreciate the committee's process in helping to ask good questions. Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nick, can you clarify through the bill, are teachers required to have their district issued or union issued liability insurance first and then add this as excess? Or is there a process allowed by the bill allowing them to skip over the district or union insurance and go straight to this liability insurance?
Certainly. So I believe the Tort Claims Act, the district insurance would be the one to kick in first. And then the union insurance, that would depend on whether the teacher is a member of the union, number one. But I believe that would be secondary. That would be the secondary level of coverage, and this would be a third level of coverage.
And I will address that a little bit in my testimony too, but if you had a follow-up question, please proceed.
No, thank you.
Further questions from the committee for Nick? Not seeing any. All right. I will now take off my chairman's hat and hand that to my vice chairman. Oh yeah, there he is. You are now in charge of the hearing as I put on my proponent's cap. All right, thank you, committee. This is, like I said, it's a simple idea. It's something that I heard about from Tennessee. I had, last year, I had a different revisor and a different research, Eddie Pinner and Jason Long. And so they worked with me. And so some of the questions, and even for Nick, is still, you know, I think he can maybe get back with Jason and Eddie Pinner to help get those answers. I will tell you that it is my belief that the tort claims, that is the coverage that teachers have. And my understanding was that many teachers that I have talked to, maybe you have also, were under the belief that they needed to belong to the KNA in order to have that protection. And I think there was some miscommunication. I do believe that what the KNA does is provide that backup coverage. My goal in saying to teachers is, if you want to do that, you can join the KNA to have that backup coverage, but you don't have to. And that the state would be that backup as opposed to the KNA. I'm not trying to undercut the KNA. If you want to, as a teacher, belong, there are a lot of great services and reasons why you join. But it's not, this shouldn't be one of them. That's the intent and purpose of the bill. And it's very clear in my mind that it should be something that we tell teachers that we respect you enough to provide that backup coverage. And for the teachers who choose not to join a union, they know that they have the same protection that a teacher who joins the union has. So it's a win-win. If you join the union and you get that from the backup coverage, which by the way, probably doesn't really come into play, like I said, even if we looked at the history and we could ask we have someone from the KNA testifying after me, I would think pretty clearly that it's not something that the KNA is paying out a lot of claims on. And I would, when we come to that point, I'll ask that question of the person speaking on behalf of the KNA. Again, I know for me, I have a daughter who's a teacher, another who's a special education para, and I want them to know that I value them, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. I know several years ago, I worked on a bill that was about access to mailboxes. When teachers are teaching, they have a mailbox and they get information put into their mailboxes as far as a lot of things, opportunities for learning, continuing education. One of those things that comes in is information from the unions as far as the benefits of joining their union. We got through legislation the ability for access to those mailboxes so that if there was alternatives out there for teachers, that they would have access to present their opportunities to belong to their organization. And I can tell you, in Kansas, there was a union called KANAAE. I can't remember even what the Kansas Association Network of American Educators, something, but there's a gentleman, longtime teacher, I think his name is Gary Siegel, who began to work with others. This is a group that has involvement around the country. And so they were able to start putting information into mailbox just to say, hey, here's another opportunity for you to decide what do you want to do as a teacher and providing options. That group is, primarily, focused strictly, they're non-political, let's just put it that way. And I've had the chance over the last 3 or 4 years to speak to that group. They have a convention in Manhattan. And, as I worked with them on a lot of different issues, this was a discussion that has come up. And again, I support their efforts, and I think they're a valuable asset for teachers who want to belong to a union but choose not to be a part of the KNA. Again, I'm not trying to undercut. I am trying to provide options for teachers on how they would wish to be represented. I'm trying to do this respectfully in a way that is clear on what my goal is. You know, when I work with the speaker, I told him that this was something that I felt rose to the level of being worked on, and I believe he agreed. So, in order for me to move forward, I don't get to the point where the appropriation process would even consider something like this as far as the appropriation that would be required, unless, you know, we work together to get there. And that's what I'm doing even as I work with the speaker, with appropriations, and so having those discussions. Is it important enough to us to value our teachers to provide that backup coverage? I think it is. Again, very simple idea. And, you know, you have my written testimony. I really didn't speak to it. I feel like, you know, I covered those items. And again, when I saw that even in Tennessee, the way they did it, how they did it, and how cost effective it was, and it really can be done very cost effectively with not a huge impact to the budget. I thought, man, this is a win-win. This is a no-brainer. That's my 5,000-foot look at the issue. You know, I'll stand for questions on why I believe that, and my goal, even in presenting to you as a committee, is to respond to your questions. And if there are things that need to be fleshed out, I believe we can do that. And again, I believe Nick will be able to get good answers, because I think even last year, you know, that we had done that, and we'll get those answers to you. With that, Mr. Vice Chairman, I will stand for questions.
We have questions for the conferee. I recognize Representative Samsel.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, acting as Mr. Chairman. My question, I appreciate the actual chairman's, all of his good work. My question would be, I do have concerns about the cost and whether it's duplicative, and we'll get into those weeds maybe later. But when I go back home in my district, and I'm not trying to make this political or put anybody on the spot, but I'm curious if this committee at some point is willing to entertain due process rights for teachers. Because when I go back, I haven't heard as many concerns about excess liability coverage. And maybe that's just fortunately because those issues don't come up as much. But they do have concerns, especially in some of our smaller rural districts. If, you know, whether it's superintendent's son, or not to pick on anybody, but there's instances that arise that, I mean, if you've got a bad teacher, nobody wants to keep a bad teacher. And I'm not picking on teachers. It's like any other profession, lawyers, doctors, plumbers, nobody wants a bad employee there. But what is maybe a little bit more unique about our education setting is because of the nature of it. If you've got a teacher who's wanting to stand up and do the right thing, it seems very easy that they could be getting rid of, perhaps without those due process rights that I do think are important there. But the flip side of that is that I tell my superintendents and my principals and everybody else, if you've got a bad apple, if we document it decently and do some other things, it's not doing anybody any good, and we don't want to incentivize them. But I guess I just share my thoughts with the chairman, that I have some concerns, but to his spirit of trying to work with people and compromise and all the other things, I would be willing to entertain this, but I would love to see at least a conversation or discussion about due process rights as well.
I respect that. My ranking member and I have had that discussion. It's a discussion that's been going on for years. It came up last year, as you remember. It also came up 3 years ago when former Representative Arndt was chairing this committee, and it shut his committee down. I can tell you that I have had those discussions with many people, with Randy Watson at the state board, with the School Board Association, and basically what I told Mark Tallman, and again, in the last 2 years, I've offered to facilitate that discussion on, is there a path forward, not going back to the former tenure due process, but where we're at right now and doing some things differently that would be that type of a compromise. I did have, again, Gary Siegel as that representative from the KANAE one time a few years ago say something to me about a possible issue. I immediately called Randy Watson. I immediately called Mark Tallman, and I said, let's stay on top of this. Is there something that needs to be addressed and looked at and taken care of in the way that, Mark, that I think you're saying? It was quickly found out that it wasn't an issue, but it's like I told Mark Tallman. I said, what we passed puts a lot of responsibility on the School Board Association. And as a former school board member, I fully recognize, and I'm not going to go into it now, but I can tell you of an experience I dealt with as a school board member where I was fighting for a teacher that had gotten into a situation that was, and this was 25 years ago. So I fully recognize what you're saying. I know the School Board Association has made it very clear to all of their member, and that Mark Tolman told me was all school districts. All of them are a member. And he said, if we do the right thing and we respect our teachers and we don't allow this to be abused, it's never going to be an issue. The minute one school district drops the ball and does something inappropriate with a teacher, the issue comes back in full force. And if that happens, I will jump on that bandwagon to make sure that it is handled in a way that teachers are treated fairly. To my knowledge, there is no example of that taking place since we made the change. And I'm going to fight to keep it that way. So, again, under Representative Arndt, there were efforts on the floor to go back to tenure due process, and they failed. There were efforts in my committee last year, over the last 2 years. Through the efforts that I expressed to my committee, I think I had done enough legwork in order to, when that vote took place, that it went down. And I believe that even now there would be more of the case that would be the case. Again, I made that offer. I've talked to Mark Tallman this year because my ranking member mentioned the issue to me, and he said that if there's a desire that the School Board Association, and I've said something to Randy also, they're ready to help facilitate those discussions, and I would suggest that that's the way to proceed on that issue, to discuss the pros and cons, and then to work on, if necessary, new language, not going back, but moving forward from where we're at. And again, if you haven't noticed, it's something that I take very seriously. I watched it happen to Clay as it shut down his committee, and I was committed to not letting that happen to me. And so when the motion was made, I felt like I was ready. We had the discussion and we made the vote. Some people try to portray that as a vote against teachers, and nothing could be further from the truth. Let me repeat that. Nothing can be further from the truth. Am I saying that clearly? Because I care about teachers. I care about my daughter. I care about my other daughter who is a para. And we all don't want teachers to get into a position where they have a school board do something that's disrespectful. You know, I've had teachers tell me that they respect what I'm doing because sometimes teachers self-police themselves. And, you know, they recognize sometimes as a teacher is getting closer to retirement, I saw this at Boeing. Sometimes employees, they start mailing it in and they're not doing their job and they're not being effective. And I've seen and heard where, even in those cases where teachers try to hold other teachers accountable, because what one teacher told me is we all want a good teacher in every classroom to teach our children. And so this kind of where we're at right now with tenure review process is working in a way that it's intended to work. So, hey, I got sidetracked there, but this has been, Representative Samsel, an issue that has been very visible on the radar, and I'm fully cognizant of the pros and cons. And I'm glad to work with anybody if they want to continue to do that. So it's not really in any way related to this bill, but I respect what you're saying and appreciate the question. And I'm sure that my ranking member will be agreeing with you wholeheartedly. And so next question.
I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Chairman. As always, I appreciate your thoughtful consideration. And I certainly agree it's not directly related. Perhaps I thought it was indirectly related, though, just during these especially difficult COVID times, as a way of showing our teachers that we've got their back. Because I think hopefully everybody on this committee does have their back, and including our private schools and our homeschool teachers as well. But the thought being perhaps that's one way that we could have their back without having to expend our limited financial resources. So I appreciate, I don't always agree with 100% of everything, but 100% appreciate your passion and energy. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
I appreciate the question, and I probably gave more of an answer than you were looking for. Representative Whitmore. Okay.
Mr. Chair, we couldn't hear if the mic was
okay.
on. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll repeat her. Well, I'll repeat her question. And she was talking about even 3 years ago, as far as when former Representative Art was chairing this committee, and Deborah Bremer was his assistant. And if you want details, she can give it to you more clearly than me, because I wasn't on the committee at that time. But the issue came up, and Representative Arndt, just like me, was trying to respond to that issue in a respectful way. But the committee chose to get a bill that was on the table and replace it with the tenure due process bill. And leadership, as they worked with Chairman Arndt, they eventually had that vote on the floor, not through the bill, but through an amendment. But even then, Representative Art was in a position where he focused his efforts, as he was a member with me on the K-12 budget committee, and I don't believe that the committee met again after that because of the challenges it presented for a chairman who was unable to continue doing what a chairman needs to do to run a committee. So again, Deborah can give you more details, and Clay and I are good friends. And I mentioned former Representative Arndt today when I went over to the state school board, because I learned a lot from Clay on how to be a good chairman, on how to deal with people that you disagreed with, to be respectful, and to do our job as chairman. I know there was one time in my first committee chairing elections where that happened to me. And Tom Sawyer, who is a very good friend of mine, schooled me. And I say that in a way that that's the way the process works as far as checks and balances. And I, by the grace of God, as that happened, was able to work with my committee to nip it in the bud. Representative Arndt was not able to do that. And, that's just, you know, again, as chairman, I appreciate when you're in the minority, it can be frustrating. I fully appreciate that. As a chairman, I have a lot of authority to decide what gets worked on and what doesn't. I do that under the umbrella of my speaker. As speaker, he works with all of his leaders, all of his chairmen and all his vice chairmen for us to try to do our best to be fair, to work together, and to do the job. But I fully appreciate that if you're a minority, you don't always see that way. I know when I was on a school board, I was in a minority, and it wasn't fun. And I commit as best I can to my minority members and to my ranking minority to try to be as respectful as I can and to accommodate as best I can. And I appreciate that if anybody feels like I'm not being fair in that regard, talk to me and I'll do my best to do what I can. Next question.
Representative Featherstone has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm not sure if I should have asked this of Nick or if it should go to Chairman Hubert, but do we have a rough idea how many of these teacher liability suits have been filed in a year or in some bigger data period that you might have?
We can get that answer from Nick, and that's a good follow-up question, and we'll put that on Nick's list of questions to get back with us with information.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right, next question is from Representative Stogsdill, Vice Chair.
No.
I know, I'm kidding.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the new people, obviously the chair and I could probably not disagree more on a subject than on due process. And I've had a lot of experience with due process, and I appreciate Representative Samsel seeing the relationship between liability insurance and the need for due process, or at least to have that discussion. And for the new people, when I introduced that bill 4 years ago, it was not given a hearing, and I had to put it as an amendment on a bill in the House, and the House passed the bill with my amendment twice. And I can tell you right now, that bill is prepared again, and I will be introducing it again next year. But I think it is a discussion that deserves a lot of question and answer in this committee at the proper time. But the two are definitely related subjects, and I look forward to that opportunity to bring that subject up next year for a full discussion and hopefully a vote in committee and again on the House, which, as I say, has passed that bill twice. So thank you for that, and thank you, Representative Samsel.
And I can add, I respect what you're saying. Again, even last year, that took place in the committee. As far as what happened 4 years ago, the legislature that came in after the 2016 election definitely took a swing that direction. And that was what I call part of the Brownback effect. And where we are now as a legislature is swung back the other direction. As I look at my committee today, if any of you as Republicans want to talk to me about this issue, I'd be glad to have those discussions. As any of you other than Jerry that would have that discussion with me, what I just spoke of previously in the committee is again a commitment to teachers, and I'd be glad to talk with anybody about that effort. I believe pretty strongly that it would not pass out of this committee at this time. I could be wrong, but you know, I would say to my ranking minority, if you believe it that I'm wrong, you know, check with the other members on that committee, and if enough people on this committee agree with you, then let's talk. And I look forward, if you get that type of input, to to reevaluating my position. And I say that respectfully, and I hope you understand that. But again, in the meantime, I do believe that there are opportunities through the state board, through Randy Watson, and through the School Board Association to advance efforts to get to what I believe would still be a good compromise. And they're ready and willing to have those discussions with you, and I'm ready and willing to participate. Again, we're having a hearing, and we're getting into a lot of good topics, and I appreciate the relationship as far as my desire to value teachers is tied in with some of those topics. Further questions from the committee for me?
Seeing none, I believe we will close the,
The proponent section. All right. Chairman hat back on. We have one opponent, and I believe her name is Marjorie. I'm going to probably mispronounce this name, Blaufus. If I did butcher your name, please accept my apologies. The floor is yours, Marjorie. Maybe it's written testimony. Okay. My apologies if that was written only testimony. You have that before you, I hope. Has they had a chance to? If you haven't gotten it, it's pretty short, but I'll read her testimony just so it's a part of the record. I know a lot of times when handouts get put out, pulling them up sometimes doesn't happen. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, on behalf of the KNEA, I offer this written testimony in opposition to House Bill 2038, creating of the Educator Protection Act. While the KNEA appreciates the stated purpose of HB 2038 to provide excess professional liability insurance coverage for teachers across the state of Kansas, we do not believe that such additional expense to the state is necessary. Currently, each school district carries liability insurance for teachers under KSA 75-6108 of the Kansas Tort Claims Act. KSA 7299-38 also requires that school districts to give each teacher notice of the protection that teachers has through the school district's insurance under the Tort Claims Act. The coverage is in addition to any coverage that teachers has if it is a member of a professional association. At KSA 75-6105, the Tort Claims Act caps that amount a litigant can cover a school district at $500,000 unless the district has excess coverage. Although the bill's intent is to provide additional protection for teachers, one cannot help wonder if the added insurance coverage by the state will encourage lawsuits against teachers due to the deep pockets of the state of Kansas and now made available to litigants. We believe that teachers already have significant liability protection through the Tort Claims Act, and HB 2038 is in that is duplicate, represents unnecessary expenditures for the state monies. And to that written testimony, it highlights my belief that if they agree with this, then they wouldn't be marketing their efforts as a union to provide that coverage themselves. And again, for teachers who believe that is necessary, that might be the sole reason they make that decision. And I'm just saying that I want any teacher to have that backup coverage that they are offering through their membership. And that this testimony makes, in my opinion, the case for why my bill is necessary. And it again is respectful in the sense that the KNEA markets many very valuable tools to entice teachers to join their union through collective bargaining. I respect that. This issue shouldn't be one of those reasons, and that's the intent of the bill, and that's the reason why I introduced it and believe it's necessary. Further opponents or proponents, that again, it's very cut and dry. My testimony, the KNEA's testimony, it's in my opinion, very cut and dry, clear issue. And without further questions or comments, who's that? Representative Samuel, did you have a question? The opponent is not available, but if you have a question for me or for Nick, I'd do my best to respond. Or if it's for Nick, then I'll let him respond. Go ahead, Representative Samuel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it doesn't make any difference to me who's able to answer it. I hope it's an objective question. I'm just trying to understand, and this maybe gets into the fiscal note, which I understand its current status, but who's going to be paying for it and what the benefit is to our teachers, and how that, I think maybe one of the other good representatives raised this earlier, but is this some added benefit, and for good reason or bad reason perhaps, but as compared to what other state employees are receiving, if you will. So those are just my questions, and I don't even need an answer today, but those are just ideas bouncing around in my head.
Hey, it's a good question. I do believe that Nick is going to get us answers on a lot of other questions. And if we do choose to work the bill, that'll be a part of the discussion. And I appreciate as chairman, I break ties. I don't vote. And I might have a bill that I believe in and testify for and bring forth. But at the end of the day, there's 17 members of this committee. And the committee will be done because each of you get to use your one vote to decide any bill that's brought forth to be worked. Question from Representative Estes.
I also am struggling to understand the funding source on this. And the way I read it, you could have insurance coverage through the teachers union if you qualify to be a union member, through the district, and then this would give you a third if you're a public school teacher. But is your purpose in this that you're trying to provide an option also for certified private school teachers?
That is something that I need to discuss with Nick as far as how the legislation is written, and he and I will have that sidebar because it wasn't really my intent, but if there's that possibility, I need to look at that question. It's a valid question, and to be honest, Nick, can you address that as far as how the bill is currently written? Because that, again, was, I think, not really my intent, but I do believe, well, Nick, can you respond to that question?
Yeah, certainly. So as the bill is currently written, this would apply to teachers licensed to practice teaching by the State Board of Education. So if they have a teacher's license through the state board, they would qualify for making a claim under this insurance coverage, and as well as student teachers, if they have a student teacher certificate issued by the state board, they would qualify for a claim.
And as a follow-up, does the tort claims provide that protection to anybody, any teacher that is under that umbrella of the state board?
The Tort Claims Act is specific for governmental agencies. And that directs how governmental agencies can sue and be sued for tort actions.
Okay, that might be for me even because this was not a backdoor attempt. And so if clarifying language is necessary there, Nick, I'll be talking to you about that if I do decide to work this bill. So you might be thinking about that on how we might make that balloon language.
Certainly. And some of this is also dependent upon the insurance policy that's procured by the insurance commissioner. If that policy says it's a third level of coverage, it would be the third level of coverage. If that policy says it's covering for public school teachers and student teachers, that's what the policy would cover. So there is some leeway, I guess, for the insurance commissioner to make some decisions there.
Hey, Nick, I appreciate we've given you some good questions today, and you're going to dutifully do your job. I would appreciate, even as you do that, to provide us, some written answers, and then maybe at a meeting in the future, you could go over that and give committee members another opportunity to ask questions once you do your research and get the answers that have come up in this committee. So,
Yeah,
committee, I
Mr.
want
Chair,
to.
oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Some of those questions that, like how many claims have been filed, the amounts of the lawsuits that have been filed, and the amounts that have been litigated and required to be paid under a tort action. Some of that information, I mean, it's going to be hard to just go through and find every instance of a lawsuit against a teacher under the Tort Claims Act. So it might be best to put in a something with the Department of Education, asking the school districts how many times their tort claims insurance coverage was used for claims of this nature, and then also see if the KNEA, I guess, has information on that excess coverage to see how many times excess coverage provided by the KNEA is kicked in.
Well, and maybe even some of that we can get research involved to help, and maybe Jessa Farmer can help. Is Jessa on the WebEx today?
Yes, I'm here,
I see
Chairman.
you. Well, I'm going to give you the added opportunity to assist Nick in getting some answers here, and then we will let you duly provide answers to us. This is a great opportunity for you to help Nick, to help me get the answers that our committee is asking. So thank you, Jess, in advance, and I think Nick would appreciate your help too, because some of the questions do get more into the research side of the equation as opposed to the revisor side. So Nick, I hear what you're saying, so I'm getting you some help to get the answers that we're asking. Is that good, Nick?
Certainly.
I know Jess is just jumping at the opportunity to assist in getting the committee answers.
I mean, it'll just take some digging, and some time to really.
I get that. I understand. So do the best you can. I know Jessa will help you. And, I appreciate that's all we can ask. And so thank you in advance for the answers that you can provide in a timely manner. And don't let that be more of a challenge than it needs to be. I respect that you are diligent, both of you are, and you will do your jobs. And I know that I look forward to getting the best answers we can get at this point in time. So thank you in advance. Any other questions? All right, again, I'm going to close the hearing, but I am going to ask for, the ability, even as those answers come back to us, to get a chance to get more answers and discussion before the committee. Sometimes that happens when you work a bill. And if that's the case, then I will give full opportunity to allow that to happen in a way that is respectful to everybody, to make sure we all are doing our best to get answers and make sure we're fully understanding the bill before us so that we do our jobs as legislators. So we are going to, again, adjourn the hearing on 2038. And it's 2:38. I think we have the opportunity right now. We'll see how far we get along the process. I know that there was no opposition to both 2085 and 2124. I would have considered putting them on the consent calendar, but I think with this committee working the bill in a way that would allow the bill to be carried on the floor offers opportunities for new members to get that opportunity. And I've already spoken with a couple people about that. So it also gives my vice chairman the great opportunity to do what all vice chairmen get to do, and that is writing a bill brief. So as a former vice chairman, I know I always relished the opportunity to work on a bill brief, and I don't want to deprive you of such a great pleasure. So, all right. I would, again, on those two bills, I think we'll work those real quick. I know my bill we'll have more discussion on because there was differing opinions, and I respect that. So the chair would entertain a motion to pass out. We'll deal on my list. The first one is 2085. Again, when we open up a bill, we make that motion, we are then opening up the bill to amendment. If anybody so desires, I don't believe that's the case. I haven't heard of any of that. And again, they're bills that were kicked out last year. But first of all, I'll let my vice chairman make, if he would so desire, 2085.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the committee pass out House Bill 2085 favorably for passage.
Do we have a second? Representative Estes seconds. We have a motion and a second. We will now open up discussion from the committee. I'll just again say, even on this bill, the maker of the bill worked with the Board of Regents in order to accommodate the dual goal of providing information to our patrons, our constituents, both parents and students, to have as much knowledge as possible as they make choices about higher education. And I think where we're at right now is a good bill. It got kicked out. It didn't get worked. Here we are again. Without further discussion and without amendment, I would allow the vice chair to close on his motion, but I do want to provide the opportunity for discussion from the committee. Representative Stockstill.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the opportunity to ask a couple of questions. I certainly agree with the intent of the bill to try to get our students as much information possible about higher education opportunities. I also hope that would extend to such things as trade school opportunities to work with unions and their training programs, that sort of thing as well. But I'm still at a loss as to exactly how this would work. Are we talking about requiring the counseling department to meet with students personally, one-on-one, or giving group
There's no requirement.
presentations? Pardon?
There's no requirement, but it is the intent to promote as best as possible. Again, this tool is already available, and I guess it's a way of promoting that tool to make it more accessible, make it more aware, and to make it more fully utilized in helping parents and students make good choices. Nick, I don't know. Well, and I'll just let Nick jump in real quick here. Normally, we have part of the discussion, the reviser just give us a brief update. So that question, and then any thoughts you might share, Nick, as far as anything you might think is pertinent for us to know as we look at working this bill. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, the only requirement in the bill is just to provide and ensure that distribution, including by electronic communication to each student or each student's parents. There's no other requirement in the bill relating to how that distribution has to be done, or any requirements regarding counselors or anything like that.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Jerry?
I'm just, my concern is, and I've talked to several counselors about this, and that, as I say, my wife was head of counseling at Shawnee Mission East for 14 years. And back then they had enough counselors that she was totally focused on college counseling. and she met with a lot of students individually and so on like that. Well, that's completely gone because when she was head of the department, they had 7 counselors. Now they have 4 for the same number of students. And my concern is that we have that information available to those students, but not requiring counselors, requiring them to meet individually with every student or something along that line. Because I don't think we have the counseling resources to really effectively carry that out at this point.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you, but I am saying that this is a way to at least do better and to provide even for parents and students resources that if they don't have the ability through a counselor or through somebody else to get the help that they need, this is a tool that they can use. So it's not going to mandate, it's not going to make any additional requirements, but it is a tool that can help us with limited resources do the best we can to help students get good college information for choices they make.
Again, I think we're looking at the same goal, but when you say providing, is that like just providing the materials in the counseling offices, that sort of thing, to making
That's already happening, and that's, again, the intent. And again, I'm not trying to think that there's any additional mandates or requirements that would, add to that. But I know the counselors, even as we've talked to them in the past, and maybe that might be a group that we could bring in before us in the future, could give us their input. But the ones that I've talked to in the past, and even I think that we've had before us, have shared their desire that this is a good tool that they want to help communicate, and it's something that helps them do their jobs.
Well, in light of that, and I totally appreciate that approach to it, that I do think that we should have had counselors in here to give us their views on this, since this is really kind of their purview. And I'm just wondering if we might put this bill off to a point where we can bring Counselors Association or representatives of counselors, that sort of thing, in, so that we could have that discussion with how this would be implemented. Because as you're saying now, this isn't adding to anything. If it's not adding to anything, I'm not sure why we need the legislation, but I would like to hear from some counselors before I would vote for this.
Well, I tell you what, I respect your opinion. I'm going to move forward as far as where we're at, but I'm willing to work with you to get their input, and that input will be provided to the committee. And then if the bill is carried on the floor, we'll make sure that's a part of the discussion when the bill is worked on the floor. But at this point in time, that is probably not productive. Because, we had the hearing, and again, if they wanted to testify, they could have. And again, if they want to provide information to the committee based on, you approaching them and saying that you believe it would be value added, I think they'll work with you to do that. And we can have that as a part of the discussion on the committee of the whole when the bill is worked at that point in time. So respectfully, that's what I believe where we were at right now. And I appreciate if that answer does not meet your goal. I appreciate sometimes you have to stand to your convictions and vote no when we make that decision. I hope that I will work with you so that when it gets to the floor that you would be able to vote yes, because we'll respond in that way that would give you the confidence to vote yes at that time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Further questions or comments from the committee? Representative Thomas. Oh, Featherston, I was going to let you close, but never mind. Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say, as somebody who had 2 kids in college for 4 years straight and is just graduating those, I really appreciate the intent of this bill. Also, Johnson County Community College is in my district, and I think it's great that parents can see the opportunities that our tech programs there provide for kids and how they can lead to real careers with great earning potential. So I want to thank you for that. And I guess I'm following up to Jerry, but maybe I don't need to. is this changing anything we're doing now, or just
I don't believe-
reinforcing that we value that?
I don't believe so. And again, I believe the maker of the bill worked with the Board of Regents. There was a lot of what you're talking about in the bill. All of that was removed. It was a part of a compromise with the Board of Regents to do what they believed was best, to not go above and beyond that. And the maker of the bill agreed to that compromise and allowed the rest of those pieces of his bill to be removed. The Board of Regents then was very willing to testify in support of the bill based on that compromise.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I follow?
Yes, you may.
I'm looking at my notes, and I wrote Board of Education supports. Should I have written that Board of Regents supports this?
Probably as Board of Regents.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Further questions? Seeing none, Representative Thomas, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
All right. You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. If you are raising your hand and you're online, I want to make sure that you're visible. But I think right now, I think this can be a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion is passed. All right. Next bill. And this is the Cleveland bill. And again, it was kicked out. It's already been passed in the Senate. Part of me believes that, maybe we don't need to pass it out here, but if we both pass out similar versions, we'll very quickly be able to get this bill to the governor's desk. It should have happened last year and it didn't. With that, Mr. Vice Chair, if you want to go ahead and make the motion on House Bill 2124.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee pass out House Bill 2124 favorably.
You have heard the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I see lots of seconds. So Representative Sanders,
Second.
your hand was quickest up. So you are, and again, Deborah made me to make sure that we clearly have identified so that she can put that in the minutes. You are now in the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, you've heard, we have a motion and a second discussion. Again, last time I skipped this step only to have to come back to it. Nick, could you just real quickly, for the committee's benefit, give a summary in a way that we all are clear so that when we make the vote, we know what we're voting on. Thank you. All right, I'll get to Stockstill next, but I'm going to let Nick just give us basically a abbreviated summary of his bill brief.
Yeah, Committee House Bill 2124 authorizes healing arts schools to practice in healing arts school clinics. This is specifically for Cleveland University, kind of due to a change that happened a few years ago in the law. And this would just clarify that Cleveland and healing arts schools could practice the healing arts. And that's the summary of the bill, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Further discussion or questions from the committee? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nick, does this really apply to anybody other than Cleveland?
Probably not. I think it's all hinging upon the State Board of Regents approval. And due to that change in the law in 2017, Cleveland no longer requires the State Board of Regents approval under the Private and Post-Secondary Out-of-State Institutional Act. So I can't think of anybody else who is in kind of under that or exempted from that act that is a healing arts school.
Thank you.
Further questions? And I will state, I talked to Julie Hine, who represents the Cleveland Chiropractic School of Healing Arts. And this bill has already been kicked out in the Senate. And I believe it's profitable for us to kick it out here because it'll expedite getting it to the governor's desk if that is the will of the full body in the House and the full body in the Senate. Further questions or discussion? Seeing none. Wait a minute. Joe, Representative Stockdale, did you have a question?
No, that was answered. Thank you.
Okay. Further questions from the committee? I don't want to rush anybody, but I think, like I said, I think we're probably ready to close.
With that, I close.
All right. Thank you for your closing. It was very concise. You've heard the motion. All those in, favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. No nays. It's unanimous. Thank you. The motion passes. All right. We're doing good work. And again, we'll see how this next one goes. Time-wise, if we don't get there, that's fine. We can always go later. But I entertain a motion from my vice chair again on 2039.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee pass out House Bill 2039 favorably.
Heard the motion. Do we have a second? I just went blank. Perfect. Sorry, my eyes aren't very good, and my apologies that sometimes remembering names right now. My apologies. Representative Murphy seconds. And so we have a motion and a second. Open it up for discussion. I will just tell you this, committee. Again, I mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting, and I have a commitment from the state board to discuss this issue further. I'm going to be getting with Randy Watson. My intent is to find balloon language, and I have talked to Nick about that. I signal very clearly that there's ways that I feel like that we can do that. In moving forward, I believe it is my intent to not try to push ahead until I have that chance to work with the state board and with Randy. And I can just tell you, the reason why I do this is last year I was in a position where my discussions bogged down because it didn't come out of committee, and that's sometimes what happens with committees. I believe in discussing with most of you as individuals that you are in agreement with where I'm at. Some of you have questions and appreciate my desire to find that compromise balloon language, and I am very committed to doing that. I believe that it's appropriate for us to make this motion and to kick it out of committee and then continue. Sometimes even as I spoke earlier, sometimes even as bills get worked on the committee of the whole, it's a way that the process works. And so if through my discussions, we will move forward, and I believe that this will help to help facilitate compromise. Further questions, Representative Samsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate all your good work and thought. My concern remains with the $400,000 fiscal note, but I understand what you're saying. My preference would be if the chair wants to move this out today, and I will support the committee as whatever it decides to do. But my preference would be if we move it out today to do it without recommendation to committee of the whole. So as passing it out favorably, I would be a no.
Okay.
But if we did it without recommendation, you'd have my full support, or at least my compromise support on it. But that's just my thoughts moving forward. But then again, if you're going to get a balloon amendment where everybody's in agreement, I just don't like doing amendments on the House floor. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
No, I understand that. And in a perfect world, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But I believe right now where we're at, it's the best way to proceed. If the committee disagrees, I respect that, and then I'll adjust accordingly. But I appreciate even if you do know at this point in time, I will not consider that a sign of disrespect in any way, and fully appreciate the comments you just made. And thank you for sharing your thoughts. Representative Stogstill. Schreiber.
Thank you,
Representative
Mr.
Schreiber.
Chair.
Oh, wait a minute, my vice chair is confusing me. Representative Stogstill and then Representative Schreiber.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. If the state board is still wanting to have discussions about this issue, I think maybe this is putting the cart before the horse. And I would like to see this brought back at a time when we have all had an opportunity to hear what the state board has, because for one thing, in my opinion, this curriculum development like this is the purview of the state board, not the legislature. And I just want to remind folks that in my 5 years on this committee, rarely have we ever seen where Kansas Association of School Boards, the United Administrators Association, and KNEA all in full agreement with each other that this is not a good idea. And I still have a lot of questions that I would like to ask. I'm also with Representative Samsel. I still do not understand what the $400,000 is being spent on. I don't understand how much teacher time this is going to take. I don't understand how the test is actually going to be developed, and we can be assured it's standardized for all students in the state. I think it's, when I'm looking and seeing how much teacher time this could take and what other expenses could be associated with this, it goes way beyond $400,000. And I think to just shoot this out of committee before we've had those kinds of questions answered is just irresponsible. And at this point, I think obviously this country needs more information on civics, especially in light of what happened on January 6th when those yahoos attacking our Capitol building. But I think that there are just a lot of questions that we should be having answered, and we should be having the opportunity to ask those questions before we vote to take this bill out of committee. I might be for it in a future time, but right now, until my questions are answered and some of these fiscal questions are answered, I have to vote no.
I fully appreciate that. As chairman who's worked on this issue, I believe I can choose this path as a way of getting to the goal that we all want. And again, I'm committed to finding that compromise. The questions and discussion that you talked about could have taken place in the committee when we had the hearing, and they didn't. So for me, that's disappointing, but for me to move forward, I think gives me an ability, even as I work with them, to not get to the point where my choice is to basically, have to get my bill in order to get their buy-in. And so, again, I told them when I spoke with what I'm trying to do, I believe there is an urgency. And again, even going back to Attorney General Schmidt, he made this basically same motion without legislation to them 6 years ago. I appreciate the efforts of the state board through their civics advocacy work. I heard that presentation today, and I'm going to get the committee copies of that report that was presented to the state board today. Good efforts, good things that I want to help facilitate and promote. By moving this bill forward and negotiating, the reason why this bill is unique is because it's already in statute. The requirement for that civics class is there. I believe we need to define that in a way so that we make sure that our students are learning what was the intent even when it was first put in a statute. I don't believe that's really happened in a way that anybody is happy. When you look at the state board's assessment, I can provide that also that I got. You know, the 2016 and 2018 tests clearly show that. The NAEP scores, and I have copies of that also that I can get to the committee, but I believe that this is something that is important to move forward. And based on my previous experiences, this is a good way to keep things moving while still reaching out to the board to get a solution that we can all have a unanimous vote on. That's what I want to do, because if I don't do that, then there's a good chance that I fail. And if I fail, that's on me. And I don't want to fail. So I'm asking for your vote.
Mr. Chair, I would also say that you know, the results of a hearing can often trigger more questions after the hearing is over and after you have time to stop and think about what the conversation was during that hearing. And that certainly generated a lot of questions for me after the hearing was over based on what we heard in that hearing. So I think that there should be an opportunity for us to, especially in an issue like this, to have those questions answered. And plus, I think if I don't understand it and other members of the committee may not have a full understanding of the fiscal impact that this may have, we're talking about a minimum of $400,000. And again, looking through my observations and my calculations here, it looks like it could be considerably more than that. And I just think it's irresponsible to put through a bill through the committee without having a full and total understanding of what we're spending and what we're spending that money on.
And there's many things that you said that I agree with. The fiscal note was basically under the premise of the number of students we have times $10 per test. And again, I believe that that is something that is not accurate. I hope to, even as we move forward, to get that clarified in a way, especially if we're able to accommodate the balloon language that I believe is very doable to get there. I appreciate that right now you're going to vote no, and I respect that. And I commit to those who vote no that I would give my diligence to get the answers and to find the compromise that I believe is necessary to get not only this bill through the House and the Senate, but signed by a governor. And for me to do that is, you know, it's going to take work on my part, and it's going to take work on the part of the state board to get that done. And I say that even in the sense that the state board made it very clear to me, you know, as far as the roles that we all play and their role. And again, this is already in statute, and we're trying to clarify that statute. The thing that happened that motivates me now is that between last year and this year, the state board chose to not only not have the 2020 assessment happen, but they've made a decision to not do that assessment in the future. Absent that future assessment, there is no assessment other than a task-based type of requirement that would allow students to demonstrate their knowledge in a way that I don't believe, although very well intended, would meet the goal of the legislature to make sure that the statute is being meeting the goal. This is clarifying. I would believe that we can get to that game of assessing in a way. But right now, based on state board decision, there is no assessment. And I believe, again, even in my working on the issue, the results that we have both at the state and then the national level with the NAEP clearly show we are not getting the job done. And you mentioned even things that have happened in our country recently. That's why I have the motivation to move forward right now, because it needs to be addressed in a way that our students are not just getting the basics, what I call the multiplication tables of civics, but also to get that critical thinking skill that we want. You can't get the second until you get the first. And that's why I am doing what I'm doing today. And again, I will, even leaving where we're at to the will of the committee, for those who vote no, you hold me accountable to get to my end game and my desire to find compromise. And I'm not in any way upset with anybody who chooses to vote no today. You will just motivate me to work that much harder. Representative
Mr.
Schreiber.
Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just one real quick comment. I am just really uncomfortable with having my name associated with a bill that I don't feel has been fiscally examined enough, and I would like to have my vote recorded.
Well, and again, we're not to that point, but I always provide that opportunity, and then that goes without question. And again, that will be how we do this vote.
Okay.
We won't,
Thank you,
we
Mr.
won't
Chair.
have, we won't have a voice vote. I get that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope to have you help me to accommodate getting to, and if we don't, we don't. But then I admit defeat. All right, further questions? I think Representative Schreiber and then Representative Orr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate all the discussion. I'd like to go back to Representative Samsel's comments, and I agree with him that we have 2 weeks left before turnaround week, and I'm not sure that this needs to be rushed so quickly. If you are working with Department of Ed and if they commit to getting something out soon enough before turnaround, I think we could work amendments in the committee and then move something out maybe with greater support. And my, I feel your passion for civics, and I agree with you, and Representative Stogsdill mentioned it too, the need for greater civics. But I've taken just over the last 3-4 days, I've taken twice the naturalization test that you can get online and do the practice test. And it's really a history test. It's not a civics test in my mind. It's who was the president in World War I, or what war did Eisenhower serve in? And not that that's bad or anything, but if we're going to encourage civics in our schools, I think we need to really kind of decide on what that civics is going to be. To me, it's getting those kids involved in the community and in the process, whether it's local government or state government or whatever, to give them a feel for how all the laws that affect their lives come into being and how they're instituted. So those are my kind of concerns right now. I think we still have time in the committee to address this. Hopefully the department can come up with some ideas along with you, and we can work this in committee. Thank you.
And I've taken the test a half a dozen times, and so I appreciate that there are those types of questions. Most of them more are civics related than history. But again, even in that, it's the kind of basic information that we require of new citizens. And I greatly appreciated the testimony of my constituent, Carl Mon, who's been through the process. And his comment to me, even when I discussed it, was, he said, Steve, this is baby steps. I can't even believe you're having to have this discussion. Again, it's already in the standards. So I appreciate the standards. I appreciate the Kansas Civics Advocacy Network that is doing what you're talking about doing. They go hand in hand. You get to the second by at least doing the first. The first, in my mind, isn't happening in a way that gets the job done. And that's, again, why I'm passionate about this and asking for your vote. The reason I believe it's necessary to do now is based on my previous experiences in trying to move this issue forward. And I believe this is, although not the preferred method, it is a method that is very able to get the job done in a way that I hope and is my intent to make everybody be able to vote affirmative if it gets to the committee of the whole.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So, I mean, if the goal is to get it over to the Senate and so forth, that means we gotta do it before turnaround. So I guess I'm still missing the urgency here about trying to get it out.
I'll tell you what the urgency is. You know, we've been told from the beginning, don't assume that the legislature is going to continue to operate as it's operating. At any point in time, if we have a situation arise where there is some type of an outbreak, and I believe leadership's doing everything they can to not to let that happen, but if it does, then we shut down in a way that I was told if this was a priority for me that I needed to do it right out of the chute. And I've tried my best over the last 5 weeks to give time to get to where I wanted to be. For me to do what I'm doing now is saying that 5 weeks later, the negotiations and the compromise that we would like to reach haven't happened. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, based on even what happened last year. And with the threats of, there are no guarantees that we will be here 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now, or, you know, that's my desire to do what I'm doing today, just in case that is the situation that we face. And again, for anybody that wants to vote no today, I am not in any way disappointed with that. I understand what people are saying. I'm trying to do what I do based on the information I have to try to get this done. And I appreciate for those that disagree with me, you know, go ahead and vote no, and then hold me accountable as I continue to do what I'm doing. Because if we do kick it out, I can continue to negotiate to the point if at a later date we can move forward based on some type of a shutdown. We're more able to do that this way than not. Representative Orr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a lots about this bill that really resonate with me. I think the timing is really great, but I am really uncomfortable today with some of the things that I perhaps should have asked in a hearing and didn't, but I didn't have a good enough understanding at the time to do it.
Okay.
I will be in full support of putting this bill out without recommendation, but today I'm going to have to vote no.
I respect that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm welcoming Representative Stajil to my office. His computer battery has died, in case you were wondering.
Okay.
I have two things. I'm a little bit of a math nerd, so I was thinking of the kids in my district that are, well, actually I have 3 school districts in my district. They're going to start taking this test as soon as they can in 7th grade. And if you multiply our 30,000 students per grade times the 6 times they can take it, that comes to $1.8 million. And so I'm really uncomfortable with that range between a $400,000 cost and $1.8 million. And then I have a secondary question. When I was listening to the testimony, we talked about the civics test, and I just took it at that from the citizenship test, but I'm looking at the very end of line 19 into 20 and 21, and it says, the examination shall consist of 100 questions that are substantially similar to the questions. So is is it traditional that we would be vague on that, or is that something we would tighten up to specifically be the civics test that you've been mentioning?
That is my intent. And in regards to the cost, as has been discussed, there is no cost. You can take the test right now with no cost. And it's happening. And if you go back to the testimony of my civics government teacher, Matt Klusner, he's doing it in his classroom right now without cost. And as I move forward, believe we can do this without cost because it's a readily available test that can be done by anybody right now without any cost. And so that's why I do recognize that I will work with the state board to not only to clarify what you just said, but to do it in a way where the portion of my bill that talks about rule and reg authority for the state board, I believe we can better clarify that in a way that there is no confusion. And that's, again, my intent. Representative Estes.
Yes, I understand your urgency. We're all under that same timeline. Is there a compromise way to help you send the message to the State Board of Ed that we're on board with doing something, and so that we can look at that language as you guys work together?
I have an idea. I have to recognize, even for me, to compromise. I would ask the maker of the motion to change his motion so that it is clarified that this is coming out of the committee without recommendation. That way it addresses many of the concerns that I've heard. It helps me facilitate moving forward in a way that I think is a reasonable way for me to compromise and address the questions and concerns I've had. And so with that, if the maker of the motion and the second would be agreeable, if you would make the substitute motion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee pass out House Bill 2039 without recommendation.
We have a motion. Is the second agreeable? Representative Murphy is agreeable. Okay, we have a substitute motion, and I think that substitute motion should address the concerns that as everybody's expressed to me. It still gives me the ability to move forward, and then at least in the event of some type of emergency, we've kicked out a bill in a way that allows us to continue, and then to without recommendation, to have more discussion on the floor if we get to that point. Representative Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, I know I looked at it, but I don't remember. Would there be any wisdom into continuing this discussion on tomorrow's agenda?
We're not meeting tomorrow.
Well, I guess that's a no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, committee, and I appreciate, I understand what you're saying to me. And again, for me, even to make this compromise, not my preference, but, based on what I'm hearing, it's something that I accept. And it still helps me to go forward in a way that I think is moving the issue forward. That's my goal. Representative Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the spirit of compromise, I will reluctantly support the motion to pass out without recommendation. I will say I don't know how the majority of this committee would feel. My preference would be, given the March 5th turnaround date, and I understand the COVID concerns, my preference would be to table this until perhaps February 24th, but out of the chair's spirit of compromise, I will refrain from making such a motion. I just do note that this is a bill that's getting headlines across the state of Kansas, both in the, not only across, but in my local paper. So I just hate to see that a headline that would say Representative Samsel opposes civics education, because that's certainly not the case. I was just hoping that we could tap the pedals a little bit, or the brakes a little bit, and do it. And I will note a little bit of disappointment. I believe there was an invitation at our hearing on this from the KNEA representative to, his suggestion was an HCR, a House Concurrent Resolution, which I would support and pass today if we had one. And granted, we had not had a hearing and we had not worked that. But if that was the formal, expression from this committee that that's what we want to do, I would be in full support of that. I've talked long enough and this is my second time, but notwithstanding my preference to table this, I will support passing it out without recommendation to support our chair.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah, without recommendation is basically, like you said, the same type of intent of a resolution. Further questions, and I know we're running short on time. Who? Hoskin. Okay, I'm sorry. The floor,
thank you,
question,
Mr.
what's your
Chairman.
question?
Thank you. So one of the things that concerns me is we talk all the time about unintended consequences of legislation, and very much the intended consequences to withhold a high school diploma from somebody who cannot pass a high stakes test. And so I am very concerned about passing it just for the sake of passing it due to COVID. And then when that comes out next year or the year after, that a student does not get awarded a high school diploma after 12 years of earning credits and jumping through all the hoops, I'm going to have to still vote no without recommendation.
Okay. And again, I can tell you that without recommendation, that is probably, not going to move forward in a way that I would want it to do, which motivates me more to do what I want to do. I do believe I could have passed the initial motion out of the committee, and there would have been people put in that position of voting no to something that they really didn't want to vote no on. So that's why I feel like the substitute motion is a good compromise. And again, without further compromise, I don't see it advancing past this stage. So that motivates me then to work with. But if I kicked it out today with, passing it favorably, the initial attempt, it would have kicked out. I believe that based on my discussions with my committee members. And there would have been people voting no that would have been put in a situation that it's not my intent to put them in that position. So we have another committee getting ready to come in, and I appreciate your efforts. I believe this is a compromise that allows me to move forward, to work with the state board next week. And let's go ahead and wrap up discussions. And without further comment, let's go ahead and have you close.
Close.
Again, thank you for the good discussion. And again, if anybody still wants to be recorded, let me know. But all those in favor of the motion to pass out House Bill 2039 without recommendation, signify by saying aye. Well, let's go ahead and raise your hands. And so, okay. And I'm looking on the screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 12 votes. Those opposed, you can raise your hand or on the screen. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3. I think 3. For those who want to be four. So for those, yeah, I can. So for the 4, let's make. Do you want to be recorded?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's make
Yes,
sure we have the
please.
4 recorded. Representative Wolfmore, Representative Stogstill, Poskin, and Featherston.
And Byers.
Byers. Wolfmore does not want to be recorded. Okay, 5. So there's 5. Okay. The motion passes. Trust me, I'm committed to work to find the goal that we all want to get to. With that, we are adjourned. Sorry for the extended committee.